Hi, welcome everyone. Do you hear me well? All right, awesome. I think we're gonna get started, so the persons on the live stream can hear us. So welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Leila Merck. I recently joined as a senior program manager for Project Liberty on the Europe area, the McCourt Institute teams. The Project Liberty was launched about 2 years ago by Frank McCourt. It's a 3-track project, and one of the main tracks is the McCourt Institute. And what the McCourt Institute works on, we basically try to create a new civic architecture for digital world in order to enable stronger democracy, a fairer economy, and just basically more, well, privacy for the citizens. And this is going to be actually the main issue we're gonna talk about now. I don't know if we can have oh, awesome. Okay, so as you can see, this is Project Liberty. So this is the intersection of technology, movement, and governance. What we do is, like, we believe if we don't create change on all of the 3 tracks, we will never manage to actually, transform the society the way we want. So the aim is really to make the 3 tracks work together. And today, the McCourt Institute on the governance side is very happy to hold this first event of a new series we just started, Web3 and whatever, and today is Web3 and privacy. Thank you for our speaker for joining us today, for all of you here and online. And thank you for Sciences Po, founding partner of the McCourt Institute, to host us in such an amazing building with amazing view and amazing students. So as I was saying, we are launching a new series of events you're gonna, I hope, like and hear a lot about in the upcoming months, Web3. And we basically try to take the, sometimes futurist concept of Web3 that maybe a lot of you know and a lot of you don't know, and try to make this question answer and tackle question of daily life, at least take daily life. So privacy is one of the main, issue that experts in new technology as well as different section lawyers try to tackle in our very connected world. We're gonna have a discussion trying to really understand how the privacy over the last years, and I'm pretty sure all of you heard about big scandals around privacy from platforms, but also from intelligence communities and everything. How this main question can be addressed or not, and with what challenges, what risks, what opportunities, with what Web3 brings us, meaning blockchain mainly. So this is going to be the main subject of today, and we really try to find a way for new technologies, including especially decentralized data platform and digital identity solution, to really be the opportunity to present a more equitable version of the internet, benefiting everyone and shifting the power from major platform to people. I mean, at least this is what we believe and what we're going to try to discuss today with our speakers. Advanced technology, as blockchain, is only one piece of the puzzle. Again, it's a 3-track project. And we also need safeguards and digital governance framework to prevent new ideas from being co-opted by the same all-powerful interests. So welcome to, to the exploration of this very heavy but absolutely interesting topic. Some, housekeeping remarks. You are more than welcome to tweet about the event using the handle at McCourt Inst. I don't know if... Oh, yeah, it's just here. Awesome. So you can tweet about the event and use the hashtag MIEvents. You can also ask questions directly with a mic, but also, because we're going to have a Q&A question, but also, and please don't hesitate to ask questions, every time you hear something you would like to have more information about, or you feel like you would like to respond, using the Slido at ME-Events. And you can connect to the Slido and just basically type your question anytime. We would be super, super happy to have them and try to answer them in the limited time we have, because of course we could do 2 days of conference on that topic. So please, we bear in mind your time and the time of our speakers. Now I would like to introduce our speakers. So on my left, Romain de Fouillou. He's a blockchain developer as well as a co-founder of Aurora Society, a Web3 European think tank. We have Jean-Pierre Landau, associate professor and researcher at Sciences Po, And we have Francesca Musiani, Associate Research Professor, French National Center for Scientific Research, more known as CNRS. Maybe, so the way we're going to proceed, it's a roundtable, so open discussion. We're going to try to keep it as you know, as is going and, you know, like peer-to-peer possible. So please, dear speakers, make sure that we share the time between, you know, like the three of us, and we have short response, even if we, you know, go into a topic that need, you know, a lot of explanation. So please try to find the right balance between explaining what you try to explain and making sure that we keep this discussion very, very easygoing. I'm gonna give in the next order the parole to Francesca to really try to explain a bit more about what's privacy and what does privacy mean in the 21st century, basically. Then I'll give the mic to Romain, and he will really bring the Web3 perspective on how privacy and Web3 are actually completely entertained in the history, and why basically Web3 emerged as a way to respond to the privacy crisis. And then Jean-Pierre will kind of like go in between of these two topics and explain how privacy objective relates to other public policy objectives and the like difficult technical choice that we have to make between transparency, privacy, protection, and even national security. What I would like, just because if it's okay with you, to try to keep each of your pitch as short as possible, even if for the introductory round you can have like up to 5 minutes, but definitely if you can no more, so we can have an open and, you know, like fruitful discussion. So yeah, dear Francesca, you have the stage.
I hear me now, myself now on the mic. Thank you very much, Leila, and thanks to the McCourt Institute for the invite. I'm delighted to be here. What I am going to do in the next 5 minutes briefly is to touch upon two, I guess, defining concepts that kind of shape this session. One, as Leila mentioned, is privacy, and then I'm going to touch a little bit upon what it means to have decentralized kind of architectures and platforms on the internet, and this will provide some kind of transition to what Romain will say. As Leila mentioned, there are a number of privacy challenges in the digital era that are kind of specific to the fact that we use digital tools. One is this, what has been referred to as datification, so the pervasiveness and large amounts of data in our society. There is a convergence of several dynamics that make this possible. One is that the captation and data collection tools have been progressing exponentially. They allow to stock, to reproduce, to analyze data in a number of different ways. There is an explosion of the volume of the data itself, and some dynamics that extend the use of the internet to objects and like sometimes fully automated procedures such as the Internet of Things and AI. So there are a number of economic, and societal factors that have made this possible. We can go back to them afterwards. But what is really important to retain from this first tour de table is that there is the individual is today really at the center of a complex network of personal informations that are relayed by objects that communicate, sometimes because we explicitly ask the objects to, but also sometimes because they communicate between themselves in an automated manner. So this datification is basically extending to our environment. And as a consequence, the exposure of private life of individuals has taken an unprecedented, is really unprecedented. And in part it's voluntary, in part it's not. It is really amplified by the whole infrastructure of the digital economy, what we can call platforms and social networks and the set of things, digital things that also have a very material side that we use to communicate daily. A second thing that is really important to retain here is that the personal data itself, the definition of personal data has changed because it is no longer a simple information or a piece of data that is made available explicitly by an individual in specific circumstances, but it's also it can also be all sorts of traces that we leave in our daily activities online. Some of them in not such a deliberate way. So we are not talking anymore just about our name, our surname, our address, and so on, but also a number of traces that result from this ensemble of data collection and processing activities that I mentioned before, and can be the IP address, can be what we leave behind in terms of digital traces of sorts. And so the imbrication, and this is a third point that is to be retained on privacy in the digital age, is that the imbrication that is really narrower and stronger each day for personal data in the digital age makes it so that these data are no longer saying things about the individual they directly pertain to, but also about his or her network of people that are in some way linked to the person. And so this makes it so that an individualist vision of privacy, like right to be left alone, right to be invisible, right, is no longer entirely satisfactory, and thus there has been tentatives to look for to enrich this definition of privacy, and in particular, the right to privacy, to the protection of personal data, have been assimilated more and more to a desire of individual autonomy and a need for empowerment and free negotiation of one's identity depending on different arenas and so on. In this scenario, decentralized technologies, and here we go a little closer to Web3, they have been cited or actually mobilized in a variety of projects, some of them involving blockchain, as technologies that could foster or boost this need for individual autonomy, for the mastery of one's data, of the content one chooses to share, and the tools that can help managing them. So we can go back a little more to this aspect of decentralization, but I'll stop here for now and move on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Francesca. I took quite a lot of notes, and I feel like I'm going to torture all of you with a lot of questions after that. So thank you for this first introduction on creating a broader picture of what privacy means in a digital age and how we can start to maybe imagine way to solution that. And I was particularly interested by when you say personal data has kind of like changed in the way of now you don't like need like your name to get a personal data, because you can get a collection of different small signals about you and actually find you in a much like deeper and like, you know, like private way than before. And I feel like this is something sometimes we all forget quite a lot. So thank you for flagging it, because for me it's like, you know, like pollution, like it's good to recycle a lot of things, but produce less at the beginning would be also an idea. So I think we'll cycle back on that. Maybe Romain, if you can tell us more about what privacy means in Web3 and how Web3 basically, and for what I understand, emerged from privacy crisis.
Right, so maybe a bit ambitious to explain what privacy is, but I have a few words to say about that. So actually, lots of you have heard of crypto for the financial side of it, like you earn a lot of money and you become a nouveau riche and your life is amazing, but it's just not about that. Originally, crypto is about cypherpunks. So it's a movement that emerged in the 70s, 80s. Cypherpunks believed in the need to get rid of the state in almost every area. Might be a bit extreme, but they called themselves anarchists, so made sense. And actually, what they aimed to achieve was a society where there would be no censorship of any kind. One of the most famous cypherpunks was Eric Hughes. He wrote the Cypherpunk Manifesto. You also have Timothy May. He wrote the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto. Actually, if you want to hear more about this, you can read this book, Crypto Communism, by it's in French, so it's really good. Anyway, actually, everyone that is at the origin itself of blockchain is a cypherpunk. Satoshi Nakamoto was a cypherpunk. Even Vitalik Buterin, who created Ethereum, was a cypherpunk. So what they believed in was you cannot censor anyone from participating in the financial system, for example. So that happened actually in 2010. You might remember Julian Assange was actually censored. He was barred from participating in the banking system like PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, Bank of America. He couldn't do anything. And what saved actually WikiLeaks that he founded at the time was Bitcoin.
Maybe you can give a little bit of context for the one who maybe doesn't know the background of WikiLeaks on
yeah, sure.
What the main
so,
issue.
Yeah, WikiLeaks is a website on which Julian Assange decided to leak lots of information on national secrets, namely the U.S. and the actions of the U.S. Army in Iraq, and I mean lots of things that the U.S. has done. Anyway, actually, Julian Assange was a cypherpunk. It's very interesting because Timothy May, I talked to you about Timothy May a few minutes ago. He created a newsletter, the Cypherpunk newsletter, and there was one contributor who was called Prof. And actually, Prof was Julian Assange. It was just like a nickname. And that was back in 1996, I think. And like I wasn't even born yet. Like the guy had vision. It's impressive. And so WikiLeaks is the embodiment of cypherpunks. Actually, in the Cypherpunk Manifesto, Timothy May talks of leaking national secrets, and that was in the 80s. So of course, the FBI and the CIA took real interest in that. And actually, what killed the cypherpunks was 9/11. Sorry. After 9/11, cypherpunks kind of disbanded because there was too much scrutiny over what they were doing, and they only they were brought back to life by Nakamoto basically, and by the forum that he created, Bitcoin.org and blockchain.com, and the Bitcoin magazine that Vitalik Buterin founded also. So that's the point of cypherpunks. And so Francesca was right when she said that we leave traces online, not just our name and address. We leave actually every single step of the way we leak traces of our passing. And that means we have to use, for example, private browsers. And that's actually Web3 before even Web3. You might know of Tor browser. TTOR, it's the onion router. It's an onion because like you peel it out, like there's several layers that protect your IP address. So Tor was used, of course, by Assange, by Snowden. Snowden also used Signal, the messaging app, to avoid being spotted by the US government. He now resides in Russia, and actually Signal is a great way of escaping the Russian government as well. So yeah, all of those tools that actually predate the birth of Web3 as it was coined, they still exist today, and that's what gave birth to the whole Bitcoin and blockchain movement.
So just to learn about that is basically, for what I understand, that we had these people ready to announce big information and reveal big information on American or other, big, organization basically having an issue with privacy, and the crypto and basically the Web3 in the way it existed by that time helped them have financial support as well as independence from institutions, banking institutions, but
Exactly,
also
yeah.
like messaging institutions, and basically have a way to make money, because like, you know, reveal scandals is always about money, but basically making money as well as information circulate without being caught. This is basically what you talk about.
Yes, yes. Well, actually, Web3 is a phrase that was coined by Gavin Wood, a founder of Polkadot, and he actually says that it's the way that he says it. Web3 is post-Snowden web, so
Okay,
says it all.
interesting. Thank you for that, Romain. Dear Jean-Pierre, maybe if you could give us, you know, kind of like your perspective and maybe on very like concrete level of what the issue with privacy in the digital world, and maybe start opening the question on how new tools may or may not, you know, bring risks as well as opportunities.
Thank you. So I'm not a specialist, and I will just address the issue from a sort of public policy perspective very quickly and run through the main ideas, and then maybe stand ready to answer questions. Why do we have a problem? We have a problem for two reasons. The first one is that most of the business models in the digital world are based on exploiting our data. That's about money, as just you said. And so if we introduce friction in exploiting our data, we imperil those business models. So there's a conflict between the business models and maybe the aspiration we may have as a society. The second is that even as a society, we have conflicting objectives. My government, this government in France, is very keen in protecting my data vis-à-vis big tech, but they don't want me to make a payment without them knowing it. And so you have a schizophrenic attitude of public authorities, right? So there is a conflict of objectives. That's why we have a problem of public policy. So very briefly, second point, what are the trade-offs? There are many, many trade-offs which have to be decided upon before we come to a satisfactory privacy regime. The first one is between efficiency and privacy, right? Data tells you that data theory and economics tell you that you have to accumulate an enormous amount of data and diverse data to be efficient. And that, of course, goes against privacy. And this is a dilemma that the GDPR, the European regulation, is skirting about, but it's a very important one. There is, in my view, a dilemma between free speech and privacy, right? This is going to be the main issue, the content, the Digital Service Act, the discussion on the hate speech, on the protection of children, the porno thing, and so on. And the way you can conciliate free speech on the internet and those public policy objectives of protecting children, eliminating hate speech, is that you have to make people non-anonymous, right? What allows hate speech is anonymity. So there is a tension between free speech and privacy, which is very important. Third, there's a tension about DeFi. DeFi is the jewel of Web3. It's a decentralized system of financial intermediation. And the one thing that nobody will tell you is that system works with an enormous amount of what we call in finance a collateral, right? So you're lending to someone you don't know, and that person doesn't know you. So to make the transaction secure, you have to post up an enormous amount of collateral, which goes exactly against what we've been trying to do in finance for many, many years, which is eliminating collateral. So decentralization has a cost. I think that's one of the messages that I want to give you here. So there are trade-offs. And finally, as you mentioned, not finally, there is a conflict between freedom and some public policy objective. We want to fight crime. We want to have national security. And that may not be, and that's the reason why the government wants to control my payments. So there is a kind of sort of continuity here. The governments want to control terrorist financing. That's okay. They want to control monetary laundering. That's okay. And then they want to control tax evasion, which is maybe a different issue. So there is a gradation of objective, and we have to be very, very careful about that. And finally, there is a public good aspect to it, right? It happens to me sometimes. I wake up every morning and say, do my medical records belong to me? And there are two reasons for asking this question. The first question is that my medical records have been produced by thousands of millions of hours of medical research, which have been financed by the taxpayer. And second, my medical record can help make progress in research, right? So the question of whether they belong to me, the idea that my data belongs to me and I can do whatever I like with it, which is on the basis of many theories, is an idea which deserves to be examined, right? So there are all those trade-offs, and if you don't look at those trade-offs, you're going to go into a direction where public policy cannot be elaborated. So what are the further last point? How do you elaborate public policy in that framework? Three things, I think. First, we have to recognize that preferences differ. And so elaborating the internet is global, it's cross-border. If you don't take into account differences in preferences, you're not going to go anywhere. There is a firewall in China. The Chinese approach to privacy is totally different to ours. The Chinese approach to data is totally different to ours. I can elaborate on that, and the Chinese sometimes have very good arguments about their social scoring system in terms of efficiency of distributing credits, insurance, and so on. So they have arguments, right? But it's very different, obviously. Second, and I'm going to be a little bit provocative just to, I don't think technology is going to solve those trade-offs. It is an illusion to think that technology dispenses us of making social choices. Technology offers us an enormous amount of opportunity, but we ultimately, as a democratic society, we have to debate and make our choices. And decentralization has advantages. I think the blockchain is a great instrument, not necessarily for a payment system, but it has great benefits. DeFi, I'm a little bit more skeptical up to now, and I'm waiting to see how it will evolve. But decentralization has a cost. Bitcoin is a wonderful money, wonderful cost. It doesn't work very well as a payment because it is decentralized, right? And so it's an illusion to think that we're going to come up with a web which is based on a totally decentralized blockchain and solve all the problems. That's a choice. We can go in that direction. It has cost. So we have to face the problems that there are, choices from a democratic society. And then, this is more a question, the last point, a question for me is, can we build the society on an idea that each of us have a unique ID, which may be protected, but which gives us access to everything in the society? And I think India is moving in that direction, right? India has created, I don't know whether we have Indian colleagues here, they have created a system of national ID, which, even if you're not banked, allows you to get access to a lot of financial services, payment services, social services, right? So for me, that's what the technology allows you to do. You know, you're a poor person in a remote village in India. Once you have your ID, it gives you access to an enormous amount of services, and this ID can be protected. Right? So for some reason, and I'm putting that as a very provocative statement, for some motives and purposes, being identified with a digital identity is an extraordinary, allows you to reap the benefits of the web, much more than being anonymous. Thank you.
No, I think it completes exactly I mean, I feel I'm very happy about this panel because we have so many different people with different backgrounds, but it's very rich. And I'm happy it happened at the McCourt Institute because we do agree tech is not going to solve anything by itself. And this is exactly why this is a 3 tracks project and we're here on the governance one. So I couldn't more agree. Maybe to start the discussion, what I would like to do is ask you, Jean-Pierre, maybe a question just on what you just said and then switch back to Francesca. Basically, I'd like to go a little bit deeper on the question of efficiency versus privacy, because I feel like this is exactly what us on a daily basis, like life, face. Do I want, because it's easy to use Uber Eats instead of going collect my own food like outside. Would I like more, like have one click and have all my information stored somewhere, basically my passwords on, I don't know, Google password, even if I know that it's a little bit, like about it. And we are like living in societies where everything has to go quicker, and we like used to things being super fast. To what extent do we ourselves, like completely willingly sell our privacy, sell our data, sell all of that? So I would like to go a little bit more deeper on the question of efficiency versus privacy. And maybe, Jean-Pierre, if you could go into an example of that. One example I really like is the question of airports, because we all hate, like going through airports and all the time it takes to go through the line. And one of the big questions about facial recognition is like, well, do we want to be able to step inside of the airports and don't take anything from our bag and just go straight inside of the plane at the cost of, our face being recognized on all the way? And I mean, it's hard to answer that question when you see how much time you lose there. So maybe if we could find a little example on that, maybe you could give a little bit of context from the background, and then Francesca, on that example, could maybe try to decorticate what are, like the different things behind that and how it can be addressed. And then, Romain, you could jump on that example and try to see how Web3 or blockchain try to address these issues with the question of transparency, anonymity, and everything, if you're okay with that.
So on the trade-off efficiency versus the EU and the US, one has frictions to collect the data, the other has not, and the other is going to be more efficient in exploiting big databases. That's what the theory tells you. The second point is that, as you mentioned, we all have sort of Faustian bargain. We give us our data and we expect benefits, right? And that's Faustian bargain. We still don't know how to deal with it, as you mentioned, and I don't have an answer to your question. I think the answers which are brought currently, which is we give consent or we sell our data, these answers are flawed. Because when we give consent, we don't know what we give consent to, actually. So in economy, it's called asymmetry of information. And if we sell our data, we don't know how much we have to sell it. So the whole idea that consent is the solution to that Faustian bargain, I think, deserves to be challenged. I'm not sure that I have the solution, but it's there. And then the third thing which you mentioned about facial recognition, that's much worse than that. So we have artificial intelligence programming coming, and so how much do we want those artificial intelligence to lead our life? We have digital assistants which can, in 10 years we could have organized this conference without even talking to each other. Our digital assistants would be talking to each other, arranging my schedule, arranging yours, reserving, and how much do we want that, So this is a much bigger issue in terms of our relationship between efficiency and privacy. It is a question of our freedom to act as a free individual. And I'm not sure that the Web3 brings a fully fledged response to that question.
And I mean, I don't think anything will bring fully answers aside from, like centralization, dictatorship, and no one wants that. So, and it's not even an answer to privacy at all. Because I feel like we are very early stage on discussing all of that. And as you say, choice are going to have to be made. And I think this is where it struggles. It's hard to choose. Maybe, Francesca, on that point of the different issues of efficiency versus privacy, how could you maybe on, maybe not the Web3 or whatever, Web3 perspective, but see how we can, deal with that? Either not a miracle solution, but maybe ways, to address that problem?
Yes. So I wanted to add a little bit, maybe rephrase also some of the things that Jean-Pierre just said, because they add to the complexity of the picture that I started to to do in 5 minutes earlier on. So as Jean-Pierre rightly pointed out, there is one of the first problems in whatever solution we choose to try and obtain to better enforce privacy rights is that there is this massification of data collection, and actually it is not just a matter of the data but also of the metadata, so the information that give information about the information. So it's these are generally not the kind of data that is more available to us, or we don't think that it's that important because it's not like what is more explicit and closer to us. But actually there is an enormous amount of those information circulating on networks, and try to be a lot of actors that try to leverage this or could potentially do so, and so they choose to collect massive amounts of these metadata when the law allows them to, and for now it's still.
Do you have examples of metadata? So maybe we can, really feel the difference between what we all think about our personal data and how metadata link together.
It's everything that says additional things about every time that, for example, a packet of information goes from point A to point B. It says things about the route that it takes. So additional things about the data. So it's this is one of the things we should also take into account, and it goes back to what kind of data we voluntarily leave on networks, and we choose to make explicit, and the one we don't. The second point is indeed this question of what it actually means to give consent. It's very important because the GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the current framework for data protection in Europe since 2018, it has tried to precise these concepts in several ways. And right after GDPR, you started seeing, for example, every time that you try to access the website of a provider, a commercial website, you have very detailed instructions about what you should accept or not accept to share. And please raise your hands if you have, if you systematically read what is on these windows, because I would like to know you better. So this is just a practical example of like all the complications that are beyond the principle, which is very, very good and nice otherwise, to give consent. Then at some point it has been touched upon the issue of pushing to the limit the mastery of data to actually own data, and thus, for example, use them as a commercial good. It's what has been called the patrimonialization of data, and it has been heavily criticized, starting with the French Council of State a few years back. And there is lots of good reasons, from economic to philosophical, to why patrimonialization of data should not happen. But just to let you know that it's actually one of the paradigms that has been discussed, and basically it would be about bringing to the limit this idea that if our data is being used by third parties as a commercial good, why should we not consider it as such in the first place as internet users? And also the final point I would like to emphasize is that while we look for solutions, there is a discourse about tools that are likely to give you more freedom or to foster your digital liberties, and actually these discourses tend to neglect, if they are commercial discourses, they tend to neglect a bit the amount of and the kind of expertise that you should need to acquire as internet user to fully benefit from these different arrangements of internet freedom. So this has been a long standing debate among developers of decentralized architectures, and usable security debates around these technologies, like the extent to which if you put back in the hand of the user the ability to do more things, and give him or her the ability to repatriate your data, to control them better, and so on. What are the kinds of expertise that are actually needed to fully do so? And most often the pedagogy and education about these kinds of things do not necessarily come with the development of solutions. So this is also something that has to be taken into account.
Yeah, and I'm super happy you said the word of education, because I feel if we have the time, it would be an area I would like to go in basically, and then I'm going to run back with you, Roman, but I think this is important, just super important what you just say. To what extent should we, I mean, we institution, to what extent should people in charge of the app take care of protecting the privacy of people, and to what extent should people be aware of how to take care of their own privacy, you know? And so what's the amount of education that can be, you know, like required or can be expected from the user, and what the amount of, you know, like protection we give the user anyway, even if he didn't ask for it. And I think this is a big question on all of that, and a big question, especially in the Web3 community, that really like try to think that, I mean, I believe people are empowered if they have access to the tools, and maybe people should be more responsible of, you know, like protecting their data to a certain extent, and that maybe we went too far in, you know, basically like making, you know, like dealing for about everything for the people, and maybe we should give them the tools to be more responsible of their own privacy, because at the end of the day they are the one, you know, like with the consent. So this is a big question. Maybe Roman, the question of efficiency versus privacy again, with everything that had just been said, and the cost of decentralization, the cost it goes for yeah, what are the trade-offs, as you just said, what are the part of public goods can play in that, and where public good didn't play their role, so people think about decentralization. What maybe can you say on that, and what are the tools that might be used? And again, Web3 is not like a religion, so in Web3 there is so many different ways to think about that, and I definitely feel like you could meet people in Web3 that would be like completely against what Roman would just say.
Oh, that is true. Yeah, I meet them every day, so yeah.
Yeah. So just, yeah, you know, like when we say Web3 as a solution or no, it's like certain part of Web3.
I think tech is neutral, so you can make what you want of it, but there are people who have certain opinions on tech, and they're going to use this or that tech on in a different way. I think what you said is a perfect transition. You said that people need to be more responsible. Well, originally, crypto is about that. Originally, Web3 and blockchain are about no data at all. Like, we're talking about consenting to give our data, everything. The thing is, originally, people, when they founded blockchains, they wanted no one to know anything about anything. So basically, if there's no data to share, you don't have to consent to anything. So then again, people tend to say to that argument that Bitcoin is not anonymous, it's pseudonymous. So you have a public address that you share with everyone. And to that I respond what actually Nakamoto said on a forum on a day in August, I think, of 2011 or something. He said, you should use one address for one transaction. So there's no traceability whatsoever. That's what several blockchains have been doing, actually. So there are blockchains when your public address changes every time you send money. And that leads to much more privacy, and that leads to actually no data being shared to anyone. So there's no consent to give. Well, about the collection of data, because today Bitcoin is not really used anymore in the underground economy, like for illegal activities. It says a lot about privacy. Actually now, because people use a single public address on the Bitcoin network, the CIA has the ability to trace back everything that you do on the Bitcoin network. Like, they probably know everything about any public address. Like, there was this one time where a guy tried to hijack a pipeline. I don't know if you remember that. And he actually got like a lot of money to kill his virus. The ransom he received was like $30 million. And the CIA, I think it was the FBI maybe, the FBI just got it back because they traced it back to the owner of the wallet. And yet he went through like 45 different public addresses on the blockchain. But the thing is, a blockchain is readable by anyone. So you can just go back to the original owner at any moment in time. Banks do not allow that. If you receive a wire transfer, you know who sent it to you, but you don't know like before that, the steps that come before that, like who sent that money to that person, you don't know. Blockchain allows for that kind of transparency, especially blockchains like Bitcoin, which is why today, if you want to buy weapons, you want to kill people, I don't know, you want to get drugs on the internet, don't do that, by the way, but if you want to do that, don't use Bitcoin, and nobody uses Bitcoin anymore on those platforms. They use privacy coins. That's also a very interesting topic.
But just if we take a step back, and don't dig too much on like what Bitcoin or what, like crypto or anything, to go back and again, like to really go deep into this question of efficiency versus privacy. The example Jean-Pierre and Francesca brought mainly about our personal identity and how, like it's not that much about what transaction we make, which is a big part on Web3, and I don't deny that, but it's more on how can we navigate efficiently in the digital world using that or that tool, without having people. And the question is like, what people? Companies? Platform? The state? What kind of state? Do we trust the state? I mean, we can, like go. But how, and this is where I would like to hear you more, because, I mean,
yes, absolutely.
Like how the question of efficiency versus privacy may or may not find an answer on blockchain solution, especially on the question of identity and the way data maybe like circulate around that, and how we could maybe, for example, I'm going to take the example of booking. Like we all know booking.com, like to basically like rent a hotel room. And so far we give a lot of information to run this room. The question may be, do we need to give that much information? Like, does the hotel actually need to know our name or not? To what extent? Is it for security reasons? It's just to like book the room? So maybe what we could do on this very little example, or maybe like, does they also need to know what time you're gonna book it, or if you got a car with that? Maybe Romain, you could start answering on how blockchain could help us give information without giving the detail of the information, and what kind of blockchain for that? You see what I mean? Really, yes. In a short answer, and then we could see with Jean-Pierre, who apparently like wanted to say something. I also want to remind you that we have like around 10 minutes left before the Q&A, so have that in mind. And then I could cycle back with one last question, especially to Francesca. But yeah, on really this level of efficiency versus privacy, how is blockchain maybe a tool to reach that kind of like, in between, the third path?
Sure. So I think what you're going for is, how can I not give out as much data to do something efficiently? And that's the balance that you have to find between efficiency and privacy. And actually, so my dear fellow speaker spoke of this. DeFi also has that problem. When you go on a DeFi platform, you have to you don't give out any information, but then no one trusts you. Like no one knows if you have the money. So then you over collateralize the loan that you're taking. So if you want to, I don't know, if you want to take a loan of $50,000, you're gonna have to put $50,000 in lock and key for about like 3 months. That makes no sense at all. Actually, tech does solve this. Cryptography has something called the zero knowledge proof technology, which is amazing. It was invented by MIT researchers, namely Silvio Micali in the 80s. He's the founder of Algorand. I don't know if you've heard of that blockchain. He's a genius, obviously. Got the Turing Award. It's like the Nobel Prize, but like for computer science. So zero knowledge proof is an incredible concept that allows you to actually prove that you are legitimate to do something without saying who you are. So, for example, if you enter a building, how do I prove to someone that I know the code to the gate without actually giving out the code? Well, you just like type in the code and you enter. And if you manage to enter the building, then it means that you know the code, but nobody knows what code you used. They just know that you do. Well, zero knowledge proof is about this. It's about, for example, letting someone know that you have the funds necessary in your bank account to take that loan, and yet not publicly communicate on how much you have. It's also for elections on blockchain, for example. If you want to, you have one vote associated with your identity. And the main problem right now is that if you want to take a vote on a blockchain, you have to decline your identity. For example, like a general political election in a country, you can't vote twice. So you have to say, well, I'm this person. Well, how do you do that without actually saying that you're this person? You use zero knowledge proof. That's a genius concept. It could actually like talk about it for hours. I don't think it's the right way, but
I mean, this is, I feel like, good that you mentioned that. So basically, in the blockchain ecosystem, and maybe we'll go deeper on that, like at another session, because I really like mine our time, and then we have Jean-Pierre and then Francesca. Oh, no, please don't. But so basically, you're just saying that there is a special kind of tool like built on blockchain that can help you, in my like booking example, for you to prove that you are the person or the entity or like the robot maybe one day that who booked the room. It's you. They have to give you the room. They know it's you, but they don't know who you actually are. They just know you made this transaction fairly, you know, with like enough of money, and you can just reduce from the source the amount of information you have to give, so it reduces maybe the circulation of, you know, personal or like big data information. This is I mean, I think this is very interesting, and I'd be happy if we have time to go deeper into that. But basically, these kind of tools didn't exist before these special things was invented by Silvio, and I'm personally a big fan of Silvio, so I can rely on that. Jean-Pierre, on the booking example, maybe not the zero knowledge proof, but you know, like something else existing.
I'd like to elaborate on the zero knowledge proof later, because I think it solves some problems. It doesn't solve the financial problems that I mentioned, but maybe I'm wrong. No.
If we solved 10% of the problem of the world, that would be awesome.
No, yeah, of course. I wanted to say something about privacy in relation with free speech, right? So at the moment, on the internet, I'm exposed to be insulted. I'm exposed to have my personal life outed, my sexual orientation. I'm exposed to have my children are exposed to very unwanted pornographic images, right? How do we solve that? This is the issue. I mean, if you look at what's happening in international meetings, that is the issue. And there are two ways of solving that. The first one, is which everybody is going, at least in this country, is to regulate the content. Digital Service Act, legislation against. You regulate the content, and regulate the content means you regulate free speech. Right. And because I've lived in the US for a certain number of years, I'm a very fanatic defender of free speech. So every time they want to regulate the content, I'm feeling a little bit unhappy. That's where the trade-offs are, right? I'm still not reconciled with the idea if I go out of this building, stand in the middle of the yard here and shout, I don't believe in the genocide of Armenians, I can go to jail, you know? This is a situation of legislation in this country. So I'm not reconciled with that. I'm very much a defender of free speech. So for me, the other solution, but that's a social choice. That's why I'm putting that on the table. The other solution is to have, if people hurl insult at me, they should do it under their own name, right? They should be free to do it, but they should do it openly. So a society where you have total free speech, I think, which is my ideal of a society, people should take responsibility for their work. And yeah.
No, if I might just jump on that, and I'm not saying I just feel this is, and I mean, I've been living in the US and I kind of feel the same way as you do on that. But I also mind what's happening in the rest of the world, basically. And, you know, for example, in Iran, where when people, you know, step on the public scene and say, well, you know, like when women should be allowed not to wear a veil, well, for that, if they speak in the name, they can, well,
there are trade-offs. I'm not saying it's an easy issue. I just want to make sure
sure.
that we don't jump into regulating free speech indiscriminately, which we are on the verge of doing.
And on that specific point, and I think this is very interesting, there is a question on how, and we're actually going to have an event on that. So I mean, I'd be happy to have you talking about that. We're going to have an event on how, by design, we can make sure that when someone says something, it's not that much that he can't say it. It's more like, can he say it in that way, you know? So there is a question of the behavior, you know, between the topic of discussion and the insult, but there is mainly how we can, you know, like maybe reduce the virality of things. Like, do we need, so basically it's not that much that people can say things, it's more the proportion that the word takes, and we can talk about capital, like, you know, what happened in the capital and everything. And for that, there is a big question on the design of social media, and how, rather than regulating the content, that might lead to a lot of, as you say, censorship. And we see, like, you know, people in China are very happy about the content regulation we're doing, because they're like, we told you, you know, how that can be an issue. I feel like this is what you were talking about, and this is a very tricky question, and we're going to have an event about that, Web3 and disinformation. So how the question by design. Francesca, so I just minor time, and we already have one question. Francesca, on that point, well, you can either go deeper into the question of efficiency versus privacy than the question of free speech. But I feel like you've been doing a lot of research on that topic, and from everything that we said, how can you imagine, and it can be a beginning of solutions, you know, on what should be the main focus for the public authorities, from the CNIL, from, you know, like, how do you feel about the regulation that we just got? Like, do you feel like we're going into the right direction, or do you feel like we're fighting again, you know, like the wind, and we just like not on the right point yet? And you can dig into the question of education if you want.
So yeah, I'll be quite brief. I think that the GDPR, as a matter of like framework for establishing or reaffirming, because we also have to be careful about not reinventing the wheel in terms of fundamental rights that we want to enforce or protect with new tools. Most often there is a long history of legal and other kinds of tools that have started to be envisaged to respond to that, and digital tools bring new challenges in terms of quality and quantity and new kinds of interaction, but the framework and the human rights and the core basic liberties that we try to protect are pretty much like have a long history of trying to be protected. I think that the GDPR has done some good things in terms of making sure that users, and not like the user that wants to be left alone, but users as communities of people that are like de facto share platforms where to express themselves, platforms where they have to protect it, and so on. They are put at the core of the legislation. So in that sense, I think that GDPR, in terms of philosophical principles, is really about that. And some of the newest things, as in things that were not already in the directive that was the juridical predecessor to GDPR, but were really added in GDPR, such as the data portability principle, for example. They serve this principle and this basic framework quite well, in the sense that this principle.
What is data portability?
Yeah,
to
so
make sure
it is the idea that one should be able to freely move from one platform, one service provider, to another, bringing his or her data with him or her without being siloed in, or without invisible but very, very much effective frontiers around his or her data and content being set by actors.
So if I understand well, and maybe it's not the case at all, we're basically talking about interoperability between platforms. So basically, I don't know, an influencer could go from Instagram, where they have all their fan base, and switch it to, well, I don't know, a new social media platform. Keeping, when you say the data, is basically who follow them, on what kind of content, the content they produce. So basically, people producing on YouTube could like switch to another video channel. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the idea that you can bring all of the information that concerns you. So again, data and metadata with you, and what you cannot bring with you, the platform should cancel without using it, taking it as some kind of hostage to eventually lure you back in or stuff like that.
Okay, I see what you mean, and this is also as well very interesting because on the thing that the McCourt Institute is working, we have something called the Decentralized Social Network Protocol, where one of the main things working on it is called the social graph. So basically, what you're talking about, how our online lives, can belong to us, and we basically use the platform as a way to express and use and like basically platform is like a box where we put our data, and then when we leave we can just take everything with us. So for you this is going in the right direction because we try to make that happen. Do you feel like there is hope for that to work in the next years? Or
well, I mean, it gives a framework for like trying to enforce very heavy fines on platforms who do not do that, which was not the case for like before GDPR. And like 30 seconds, I really wanted to highlight a second thing that is in GDPR, which is the privacy by design and by default principle, because it goes back to what you were saying. So the idea that part of the regulation is inscribed in the creation, design and development cycle of the tool itself. So partly it is not just about one huge conditions of consent document that people might not be willing or able to read in full, but in part it is like already enshrined into the technology.
So we have less consent to give basically at the end.
You choose a tool that best responds to what are your needs and also who your adversaries are. I can say something maybe in the Q&A about these issues of threat models and identifying your adversary as one way to choose the right tool for best protect your data.
Okay, well, a lot of subject, and I have maybe 50. Do you think European digital regulations have been made to account for development in Web3, or rather, how would the GDPR and DSA apply to Web3? This is not a question. This is the next theme of debate because there is no way we can answer that specific question. But I'm gonna turn to the speakers here, and for what they know or not know about Web3. I think this is a good question because we have the CNIL in France, that is supposed to protect us. If we don't have any centralized entity, and then we cycle back on the cost of decentralization, Jean-Pierre was talking about. If we don't have a central entity basically protecting us, are we not on or not? Is the privacy by design something good enough to jump on it, or should we, I feel this is a very good question. Maybe could Romain start on the answer on what Web3, gives as an answer, or maybe instead of GDPR offer something else, and maybe go into something less Web3 optimists. Maybe it is, but just see how these tools could work in Web3, and if maybe by design blockchain could help the GDPR to be much more protected. I don't have the answer, but that would be the way I think we should.
Well, so to answer the question, I'm not a DSA expert, but to answer the question, I do not think it's been made to account for developments in Web3 for the sole reason that I don't think the EU yet understands what Web3 is. When you see what MICA, the règlement, how do you say that in English? Yeah, right, okay. The MICA regulation on blockchain and cryptocurrency has a very peculiar and quite unadapted way of dealing with Web3. I don't think the EU...
Can you just say what MICA is and when it was released?
MICA, that was 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. It's
where?
Sorry?
Where was it released? By whom? Who
okay.
MICA?
So it's a regulation by the European Parliament, and it regulates the way actors in the crypto field deal with the data of their customers. So they basically, anyone who is pertaining in the crypto sphere is supposed to decline their identity, and if crypto banks hold assets, they must tell the authorities whose assets they are and where and when they were traded. Every transaction must be reported. And the thing is, half the transactions in the crypto field are made on DEXs, on decentralized exchanges. which are like basically computer protocols that know nothing of you. So how can you report transactional blockchain when actually you don't even know who are the people pertaining in it? It makes no sense. So I don't think the EU yet fully understands what Web3 brings or even is. I think the GSA is made solely to address big tech issues and like the GAFA and everything. From my point of view, it doesn't really relate to Web3 yet, but it will, surely.
Okay, and maybe to the other speakers. So I hear and I do understand what you talk about, and I think this MiCA regulation might be interesting to go deeper in many ways, because it also brings a lot of things. But on that point, because even if the regulation try to address the existing issues, so it's not really preparing for what could come next, but rather I feel like try to fix issues we have with existing platforms. So I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like in a way regulation are sort like without thinking that we could have something else happening, that the GAFAM could like not be there anymore. They still bring a lot of things, like GDPR brought a lot of things, DSA brings a lot of things with, you know, like some challenge, and I do agree with you, I'm a lot into content regulation. How do you feel about that question? Yeah, sure. You can go, Jean-Pierre, and then Francesca.
Well, 3 points very. GDPR is about collecting and storing data. Web3 is about exploiting data. So, in a sense, they are sort of complementary. And I don't think GDPR is neither specially adapted nor specially unadapted to Web3. So that would be my first remark. My second remark, just to be a little bit provocative, right? Web3 for the moment is a concept. Web3 is series of protocol where crypto deal with crypto. I would state, maybe provocatively, Web3 has no influence on the real world whatsoever. Neither does DeFi. So the big question for me is whether we just witnessing a sort of bubble of technological innovation, very interesting concept, which will have no impact on the real world, or whether we will, okay? And I think the future of Web3 is a question mark. I'm not going to one direction or another. I'm not either enthusiastic or skeptical. I'm just making a snapshot of what it is now. It is just crypto experimenting with crypto. Okay.
No, you're right. Actually, you're right.
And that's interesting, but that's a question mark for the future. And now I see that I mean, MiCA is a very bad text in all regards.
You are also right.
Yeah. And very bad text. So I could elaborate. MiCA is the directive on how to regulate the crypto world. And it's a more general question about how we make regulation in the European Union, right? And we as soon as we have a problem, we rush to regulate. And we don't even think, we don't have this kind of debate that we have here between the trade-offs. Any regulation is a choice between objectives and a choice between trade-offs, right? And so if we rush to regulate before consultation, then we are definitely taking the chances of a very, very bad result. So MiCA has been elaborated by Treasury officials who are obsessed with money laundering, terrorist financing, and they're right to be obsessed by that. I think it's their job to be obsessed by that. No, I'm serious. But other people may be obsessed by other things, right? And so you have to discuss again conflicting objectives. So MiCA is bad for that. MiCA is bad from a monetary perspective. For those of you who are interested about this, you should read the opinion of the European Central Bank of MiCA, and when you read it between the lines, it can be summed up as you don't understand anything about money, right? And so, and MiCA will be revised, and you will see that in this technology domain, the European regulations are revised every 2 or 3 other years, which is a sign that they were not really thought over when they were published in the first place, right? So that's a general thing, and I think the kind of debate we have that, we should have that at the European level much more often before we regulate.
Well, they will know that they're more than invited to come here if they want. I mean, we'll try to make them come here for sure. Francesca, on the same question, how do you feel about all of that?
Yeah, I guess that in some way my last reply already kind of hinted at this in some way, in the sense that well, the fact of making the cornerstone of GDPR users and their interactions between them is in some way like supposedly it goes in the sense of what Web3 should be about. So in that sense, it can be appropriate. I just wanted to add a little bit to what Jean-Pierre has said, is that in the history of technology, I mean, like digital technologies, information technologies for exchange between people, there have been all sorts of regulations and regulation attempts, and generally those that have worked worse have been those that were more closely targeting a technology with the attempt of impeding some of the uses of that technology, like peer-to-peer file sharing technology comes to mind, and with Hadopi that came with it, and those that have worked best have been those that try to provide a framework for fostering some legal principles that in general already exist, but try to update them to the global digital environment, but always with those principles in mind, instead of like trying to punish a technology and particular groups of users by punishing that technology. So I guess that as a general principle for regulation in the digital era, that might be one.
Yeah, and that might apply to every web 3, 4, 5, 6, 100. Like basically try also to target the use rather than, you know, like a special tools, because regulations stay even if it changes a lot because it's not well made, but regulations stay when tools evolve, and maybe we don't have that enough in mind, and we should definitely have that in mind while building Web3. I'm gonna take like another question there and then take the people raising their hands, because we have a question from Super Anonymous. Another issue with the accessibility and conviviality of privacy tools, unlike Signal, using Web3 to protect your privacy requires substantial tech skills. If maybe on that point, Roma, you could give a very, very short answer, because I want to mind the time and I want to take questions from the audience. Maybe if you can give a little short answer, do we need, or maybe this is the case now, but let's see in the futures, you know, because before, you know, like using a computer, like you had to be so skilled to do that, and now, you know, like even like a baby of 6 years old can do it. But on that specific question, is there a way to have a Web3, you know, like Web2 friendly?
Well, so I think, well, this isn't even a question, actually. It's a statement, and I agree with the statement. It takes skills, primarily if you want to be your own bank. As Nakamoto promoted, then you gotta have like a wallet, preferably a hardware wallet that you need to be able to use, and you need to, you know, tackle like private, public keys, addresses, and several layers of blockchain. Sometimes sending it to the wrong network and you lose your money and no one can do anything about it. So yeah, that takes skills. But I think, as you said originally, like, I mean, here today, no one knows how the internet works, and yet everyone uses it. And it's for developers to know how it works so that they can develop apps on it. But not everyone has to understand crypto to use it. And I think in the future, we might have some improvements on that point. Because for now, people generally use exchanges, like centralized exchanges like Binance, to store their crypto. And
but this is very crypto-like.
Yes.
This is very from like the DeFi point of view. But I think the question would be like, could we tomorrow use like, you know, social media based on blockchain, decentralized in many ways, without having to create a wallet? Could it be like, you know, like in a way made or given to the users without, you know, like patronizing him or whatever? Like, is it something possible?
I think the strength of
Web3.
I think the strength of Web3 is that you have a wallet, and with that wallet, you do anything you want. You send messages, you sign transactions, you do all of that. But then you're the owner of that wallet. And if anyone hosts that wallet for you, then Web3 is dead. Makes no sense at all. Web3 is about people taking ownership of everything that they do and letting no intermediary, no middleman do it for them. So it's gonna require skills. There are companies that can make it easier for you to host your own wallet and use it with like a better user interface, better manual, all of that can be achieved. But the end game is to have access to your wallet and no one else does.
Okay, so basically the way that you could have a very private email address and you're the only one to deal with it. And yes, you do need some tech skills, but the aim is to try to create like more and more user-friendly.
Exactly.
Maybe we should skip to we should go to the question.
We're going to take them all at once.
Hello, I'm Régis Chatelier, Innovation Project Manager at CNIL. And I have 2 comments and 1 question. First one is just to make the people know that GDPR is not about consent only. You have 6 legal bases that makes possible to make political choices. And that's why you have to understand that it's not about consent, and sometimes you have legitimate interest, the law, public interest, etc. And this makes possible to make choices. So it's important. And second one is that Web3 is about crypto, but crypto is not Web3. So, and we can have some possibilities to have zero knowledge proof systems without Web3. We had the example at CNIL, we published a POC, a proof of concept of what could be done for the access of website, a porno website, which is based on crypto, but not on blockchain. And for this system, what we need is a trusted third party. And my question is, who would be the trusted third party in a system for booking or for porn website or any other service? We need someone to prove that we are the person we claim we are, and if we have the good right age or the right bank account, for example.
Maybe you can take all the questions at once. And then
That was just you.
Thank you very much. It was a really insightful panel. So I'm really enjoying the conversation of the zero knowledge proof and the example of the e-election. And I think that's interesting idea, but at the same time, I think in order to do so, it is necessary to be recognized as a citizens in a centralized manner, like identification of the national, the state. And I think it's a bit contradicting against the concept of the trustless e-election. So how would it be this transition would be possible as a technology? I think it's a good example of the tech for the common good, though. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My question is more social science focused, I guess. It's more on trust. Trust is a keyword that keeps on coming up, and it seems like the invention of crypto, the whole Web3 and everything is about getting rid of the middle person, so you don't have to trust the middle person and da-da-da. But society evolves to be as many people as we are here, and we have social structure, so maybe it's inevitable to have social structure. If having Web3 or crypto, is it really to strengthen the trust among people, or are you actually eliminating trust? Because then you're not working with people anymore, you're working with machines and system. Is that actually beneficiary to social development? So that's my question. Thank you.
So I got this question, one from the CNIL part and the GDPR, and as well as how can we do anonymity and protecting data without using blockchain, maybe, and what the most efficient way to do that. We got a question on the zero knowledge proof and how the transition could be possible, because we still need to prove that we are citizen in order to use any service. So can we get, maybe I feel like a link between the states, like the authority and the user, that could have a zero knowledge proof, but that still need to be confirmed in a way or another. And then we have the question, about the question of trust. Question I really like, and I'm gonna work in the future a lot on trust. So maybe, yeah, Jean-Pierre, please be my guest.
Zero knowledge proof is fascinating, but we should not let ourselves carried away by the latest technological innovation when we look at the issues. And so it may be the future, it may be not. I think a few facts, and a little bit, I'm trying to get to disagree with you, but I can't succeed. But first, just a few facts. The first fact is that only 5% of what happens in the digital world is crypto. Most of the innovation in the digital world are not crypto and they are not blockchain. That's very
For now.
Sorry? Pardon? Sorry?
For now.
For now, yeah, of course. So yes, the question is about the future, okay? And so crypto is fascinating. I'm addicted to it, but it's only a minor part of what's happening, right? It's addictive because it's very interesting. And then there's a question of trust, and that's a very interesting question. And I think as I understand it, the basis for crypto, you trust the protocol, you trust the code. The protocol and the code are the elements of trust in a society. And you have a very recent article by Vitalik Buterin, which is called, he thinks of issuing on the blockchain tokens which are the soul of your identity and which are the basis for trust. Now, I'm not sure I got exactly...
He talks about it in that book.
Yeah.
Please read it, it's amazing.
Yeah, and read this article. It's very... Buterin is a pure genius and a very honest person. And so you read this article, I can circulate it if you like. I'm not sure I fully understand it. Yeah, and I'm just but then the question of third party, and after having said so many good things about Buterin, now they shifted, the Ethereum blockchain shifted to proof of stake. What is proof of stake? Proof of stake is a protocol where the 20 major holders of a currency decide on validating transaction. So proof of stake is a situation where the big money decide on managing the system. Now, do you trust that more? Would you put your money in a bank when the 20 biggest depositors in the bank decide how the bank is going to be managed? Is that an element of trust, right? No, I would not. I'd rather have bank managed by one person who's supervised by the central bank. I'm sorry to be old-fashioned. That would give me more trust than having the bank managed by its 20 biggest depositors. And so I see a sort of slippage in the ideology of and the doctrines of decentralization. It is actually on the pretext of decentralization, because decentralization meets with a lot of inefficiency. It goes to a situation where it's actually moving towards governance system which are much, much less trustworthy than the system they pretend to substitute to. So yes, you're right. There's this big question of social trust. I think the idea that the blockchain could, because it's transparent and immutable, the idea that the blockchain could serve as a new system on which to base social relations is a very interesting idea. It needs to be explored.
Yeah, and we're still very, very early stage.
But it needs to be explored. So I don't know whether it will bring full trust, but as a basic tool for ensuring that I don't lie to you, that I don't lie to you about my history, that I don't lie to you about who I am and my identity. Actually, it's not anonymity. It's actually quite the contrary. That I have the diplomas that I am the person. The blockchain can bring an enormous amount of benefits. One of the things I would see, for instance, is in countries which have a poor governance, I would put the land record on the blockchain, right? Because it cannot be tampered with.
Maybe so we can circulate, because I just mind the time. We have like 4 minutes officially left, 10 minutes for the one. We want to get some extras. But maybe, Francesca, on these topics, I would like to hear you, maybe also on the social, like the question of trust and everything, and maybe what space we can, that's the question of trust and truth. I would like to hear you on that. And then, Romain, maybe to answer to like what Jean-Pierre said, and
Yes.
maybe as taking maybe 3 minutes to answer the third question. I'm sorry, we won't have time for the last one. Please, Francesca.
Thank you. So I have 3 short points on this round of questions. The first one is that, yes, thank you for saying that crypto can exist without blockchain, because actually the whole conversation kind of had it as in the back, but never was said it implicitly. There is a whole world of applications and technologies that use some kind of encryption and that do not have anything to say to do with blockchain. Actually, Signal that was mentioned is one of many secure messaging tools that has end-to-end encryption built in it, but does not is not like a blockchain-based application. So this is very important to note. The second one is about trust and the issue of intermediaries, because I have to say that based on a number of papers that have been written on Bitcoin and the extent to which it has actually been able to get rid of intermediaries, which was after all its early goal, because we did not trust the financial system as it was anymore, and so we needed to invent one that was algorithmic based and absolutely not having to do with the financial world. So actually, Bitcoin re-entered the real world pretty soon in its history, and a lot of intermediaries started popping up everywhere, like people who would manage your wallet for you, people that like empty gox or stuff like that. And actually, most of the controversial episodes that happened in Bitcoin history did not happen because the algorithm broke, but because these intermediaries in some way or another were hacked or there was some kind of... So the blockchain itself did not fail, apart from like a couple of unintentional forks that were remediated pretty soon. But so the intermediaries were what fragilized Bitcoin a lot at the same time as they were bringing it into closer to the economy, the rest of the world in economic terms. And like the third point I wanted to make was to also make it more explicit that the blockchain, the reason why I think it has raised interest so much is that for the first time among a world of decentralized technologies that came before, it was really able to say, we are going to give you a decentralized solution, but we are also going to be able to maintain uniqueness of transactions. Like, despite we are going to give you this, which is the prerogative generally of like one big centralized actor that puts a stamp on everything that happens and says this has happened. We are going to be able to give this to you in a decentralized way. But privacy, you can bring some kinds of privacy in it, but it was not like the early core issue with blockchain. It was really decentralization plus uniqueness, which of course we're going more towards transparency than a lot of privacy. So Web3 has some things cooking that can change that, but yeah, this is what history tells us. Yeah. Recent history.
Let's see where we're going, and let's see what kind of also relation we have with a more global space that we still think in like a state and government way, but maybe we'll see more and more circulation and then other needs popping up, especially on the question of social media, which have not borders, and this is one of the main questions. Maybe Romain, if you could circle back on that, and maybe the question of concrete example on the blockchain side rather than crypto, if you have, on, how to answer the question of zero knowledge proof, do we need blockchain? The question of trusted third party, like, do we get rid of trust? Is it ever like something we want? In a short way, because this is a big question. And maybe if you can say a few words on the third question. I don't know if you can talk about it, but this is a question that I'm very also happy about, because in Project Liberty, we do work on a protocol to try to create a new business model. So maybe we could try to circle back on that. But please, the floor is yours, and yeah, we can keep it short.
Yes. So I'm going to start by just replying to what Jean-Pierre said on proof of stake. So actually, Vitalik Buterin wrote that book called Proof of Stake, but there's 1,000 different forms of proof of stake. The one that Ethereum uses is flawed, like truly flawed. And like if you want to become a part of the network, you need to have 32 ethers, which amounts to about like $50,000. Who has that? Like, I don't. So it is a form of decentralization that is flawed. There are other blockchains where you have to be a millionaire to be a node. Makes no sense at all. There are blockchains, however, that use what we call delegated proof of stake, where you don't need a minimal amount of money to become part of the delegation network, and you can actually take part in it. You can delegate your tokens to projects that you believe in that have real-world applications in countries all over the world, and I've been doing that for 2 years, and it's truly fascinating. I don't think we should take Ethereum as the reference for proof of stake, namely because it's been proof of stake for a few weeks now, and I don't think it's the most telling example. When it comes to blockchain and zero-knowledge proof, so yeah, of course, zero-knowledge proof, as I said, part of it was invented by Mikali in the 80s. Obviously, in the 80s, there was no blockchain at all. I think it can totally be used without blockchain. It can be used for taking loans at a bank without without disclosing your I don't know, like your medical records or how much you earn per month. That's an application. Actually, it might be quite more feasible in the short term. But I think in the end, zero knowledge proof with blockchain will allow to kill middlemen, especially in the financial sector when it comes to banks. Because I think banks, when it comes to banks, there can be no trust whatsoever. That is my point. Like, trust has failed endless times, and banks should not be trusted as a general structure. So we have to come up with something else. And this is why a decentralized protocol with some cryptographic tech could be the answer. Now, when it comes to elections, and that's just my opinion, when it comes to elections, you can't get rid of the state. Like, there needs to be a census every 10 years. There needs to be, like, we need to do all that. And I don't think the solution is to get rid of national ID. I think what blockchain could do is avoid having complete scam elections with broad fraud. I mean, like, for example, Georgia in Europe has been considering...
Just have 1 minute left.
Sure.
Just so you have it in mind, like 1 minute left. So, like, quickly, the example of Georgia, maybe, like, in one sentence, the answer to, like, the third anonymous, and then we really need to stop.
Okay, so countries like Georgia and also Ethiopia have been considering doing their elections on blockchain to avoid fraud, but then you would have to decline your identity to the protocol, and the protocol would have access to a sort of national database that is centralized, and that is the state. That access should be secure. It should be cryptographically secured, and that's like a lot of things that we need to do that. But the state here remains relevant completely.
And we're going to talk about that in the future event called Web3 and Democracy. So I know the example, and we should... No, this is true. Like, we're going to have an event called Web3 and Democracy coming in the next month. So this is what I'm just, like, cutting on that and just going on the third question so we can all finish in, like, 40 seconds.
I think the answer to the third question might be something like the DSNP. I don't know.
I mean, for me, yes, but you know, like, just taking a guess, like, how maybe, like, I mean, I heard, like, you wrote a little bit about the DSNP. How, for you, in 30 seconds, could it, you know, like, bring another business model to data exploration?
Well, it doesn't really need to be data monetization. A decentralized social graph could host decentralized applications for social media, for anything, but it doesn't need to be monetized and doesn't need to be like exploited financially. It's just that, for example, if you want to post a message, then you send it to the protocol. You can do that actually on blockchains right now. You can sign your transaction, and it doesn't even have to have money. Like, you can send like a $0 transaction with a message. Well, you could do that for social media for free. And then nobody would have the ability to read or control the message that you sent unless you give them the deciphering key, for example. Like, you encrypt your message, and if you want only your friends to be able to decipher it, then your friends give you their public keys, and you give them the key that could allow to decipher your message. For example, that's one of the uses. It doesn't have to be about money. So,
and I mean, I would like to go deeper in the GSNP. We don't have the time, but I feel like we would definitely need to do something like based on like what kind of business model, not just business model, again, like models of cryptography, of exchanging messages, etc. can be done, because this is something we're working on another track. So that's going to be about it for today. Thank you so much for first being here, for your question. You still have some things to eat and drink if needed, coffee, tea. And yeah, a big like warm applause for speaker that did an amazing job today. So please, guys, have something to drink. And I know for the one who have, courses and everything, thank you for coming.